Hello, my friends. Today we're going to be talking to Jack.
Hey, my name's Jack. I'm the founder of the Content Club. I've been on a wild journey over the last 10 years, building two different production agencies, realizing it's not for me, and then shifting gears into building a community business. In this podcast, I'm going to give you the lowdown of how it all works so that you don't make the same mistakes that I did as well.
Firstly, Jack, thank you for coming on. Thank you for the time. And I mean, you are very dominant on LinkedIn right now. You're doing a lot, etc. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out and see if we could connect. But for those, I mean, you briefly summarized it, but you come from a world where I think it was. I think we actually, to be fair, we both do. From early, I would say 2012 up through like 2018, etc., where it was like it's cool to have a social media agency, right? That was the thriving thing. And then for multitude of reasons, economy, contraction, so on, news cycle, there's been a level of, I think, concern, or I think COVID specifically kind of rewired us to be in a position where we were like, actually, why am I just chasing this carrot, right? And this wasn't actually the order I was going to start with, but I think it's really important. I think I want to start there. Why is it like? Because if you ask some people, it'd be like, you've got issues with self-esteem, you've got like were your parents loving you, etc. Like, you can go really deep in the psychology of it, but like from your perspective, from your own, I guess in some ways your own story, why did you go from feel free to correct these numbers if I quote them wrong, but like a 70,000 plus month business with five team, big office, that kind of thing, to now kind of what some people describe as a solo entrepreneur, helping small business owners really create what I call meaningful content rather than vanity metric content, which is, I think, the really important bit, especially when we've got AI, we've got people, with AI, what Google's doing with its prompt stuff and its video image to speak and stuff. I think that's going to be where the future is. But just to reiterate the question, I mean, what was the shift with you personally, and like why did you move? Because I think some people look at it and go, well, surely that was the life, right? 75k a month is more than some people make in a year.
Yeah, it's. I think for me, it was just overworked, underpaid, stressed, overwhelmed with the whole thing. Loved it to pieces, right? And we got to 10 full time by the time that I decided to kind of kill the baby that I'd made, which sounds grim. But I think for me, it was more just about what is the point? What is the purpose of what I'm trying to do? Is it just to get that next paycheck and work with bigger brands and work with more expensive projects and kind of, from an optics standpoint, look great? Or is it that I value time with my family, that I like being home, that I want to go out on more hikes and just experience things a bit more? Like, where does the value from my life come from? I think I kind of just had this epiphany moment. COVID was tough, and then we smashed it actually during COVID. Smashed it the 2 years after. We grew really, really, really quickly. But I just didn't like it. That was literally it. So there's no there's no like ulterior motive. It was just I didn't enjoy it. I've been doing it for 7 years. I felt this niggle to do something else and to actually help people, as opposed to sort of just put a plaster on the problem, because that's kind of how I feel agencies work to a degree. You'll get hired by big brands. We work with over 400 blue chip companies, which was crazy. Over 400 brands in total, but lots of those were blue chip companies. Sorry, just to quote. And we looked amazing. Like, we did stuff with Xbox, we did stuff with Microsoft, we did stuff with Huel and all the big D2C brands and whatnot. But they can kind of cut you off like that. And for us, it was just like you weren't solving the problem. You're making content that got them more money, but then they just wanted to grow more. So they maybe research other agencies and try and get bigger teams. It was just always a scale of like, where's the end of this ladder? You just keep climbing. It felt the same for us. We were growing, doing stupid money, working with cool brands. But for what? What's the point? What's the purpose? And that's kind of where I kind of just thought, maybe it's not right for me.
Yeah, and I think that's I guess in some ways that a lot of business owners are having that epiphany at the moment, right? And I think that it reminds me of some value work I did many years ago with an ex-NLP coach that I used to do some work for. And for me, it's always, I've been thinking about I've got into wildlife filming last couple of years, etc., etc. And I'm like, that's fun, but actually in some ways I don't want it to do too well, right? And that sounds counterintuitive, right? Because you're like, wait, so you're doing something so you don't want it to do well. But what I don't want to end up doing is like being away from family and my loved ones, right? A lot of the time, which a lot of wildlife film will end up being. But it's a good example of like, are you doing stuff that's in line with what you want for yourself, right? Because there's been loads of studies that show, I think it's around 70,000 a year personally. Any income after that is basically it's not really a thing. Like, it doesn't really matter because you have all of your like needs met, right? And you have enough want money and investment money where actually you're gonna be absolutely fine, right? And I think it's one of those things where people look about chasing the Joneses so much, and I'm seeing a lot of content, ironically, coming up with this like anti chasing the Jones stuff, which is like, actually you should be looking to potentially downscale because then you can make less but actually love what you do and actually be more fulfilled and actually, move those other markers, or like build a stronger brand and have to do less work so you can work on the business more, etc. But I mean, just quickly wind the clock back. I mean, how did you get to the point of even running the agency, right? Because I think so much of us, especially people who are looking to build agencies or still in this world, we potentially look at it as okay, I'm going to put out content and it's miraculously going to happen.
I started the agency in 2018. I was 21. I just finished working with my dad as his video person for his recruitment business at the time, and loved it, but we just didn't click commercially. So we split off and set my own business up. And I kind of just used it as a way to earn money, really, mate. That was really it. I liked making videos, and I thought I was all right at it. And people pay me money to do it for them. That's literally it. It was not sexy. It's no business plan. It was just, I like making videos. I want to earn money. That's literally it. So I contacted all the local pubs in my area and bars and restaurants and cafes and say, hey, I'll come and make your videos for you for social media. And I got one client, which was a pub who I think I quoted 200 quid for, and never paid me for it after I did the job. All cash in. I was dodgy, all cash in hand and everything. But I think after that, it was kind of like, right, I quite learning what I didn't do well there. So let's maybe try and learn to make a better contract or to do this and then put a contract in place, etc. You just learn all these little things. Then I started working with agencies and then kind of partnering for their clients and all the rest of it. And then we grew it to 10. We rebranded. We then kind of predominantly worked within the D2C space. But, it's almost a decade of mistakes, trial and error, practice makes perfect, that sort of stuff, right? It took us a long time to get there. And of course, we still had our challenges. I think when you go, the gap is from 7 to 13 people is the hardest point in the business, because you've got the original team, the OGs, who are really tight knit and everyone clicks. And then suddenly, when you start to grow past 7, you start to need process and structure and systems. And for me, that wasn't fun at all. And I didn't want to hire a manager because I couldn't be bothered. And the business kind of just felt a little bit weird. I sort of lost my baby. I lost my interest in it. I think the stress of managing a team and worrying about people's birthdays and that this person said this person was this, and it's all just putting out fires all the time. And I was just not on shoots as much as I wanted to. But then it's also, those shoots got bigger. It went from me and a solo guy filming on 2 cameras and maybe taking photos as a nice thing, to suddenly 7 of us on set, having a gaffer, having a lighting specialist, having an audio guy, having a producer, a director, a first camera, a second camera. And it's kind of like, gee, like this is kind of like, it's crazy because we've smashed it and we've done really well, but I'm just not involved in the nitty grittiness of it. And that's what I loved doing. And then it kind of just sort of realized that, it's just project after project after project. And we had tons of retainers, which is nice, but it was just like doing the same thing over and over again. And that was
I think I think that leans into kind of what we're discussing at the top of the show. I think it's that thing of what is the reality for everyone for probably about 40 to 50, maybe 60 years, depending on how you invest and right? Like, your reality is going to be you're going to be working a shit ton of time, right? That's just the facts of life. The question then becomes, do you actually enjoy it, right? And there's this big conversation in corporate at the moment around, actually, like, I work really hard because it's for me. I wouldn't work this hard for X large corporation, regardless of how much my paycheck was, right? And the concept of quiet quitting, etc., and putting minimum effort in. And I think that's why, to an extent, and this leads on quite nicely to my next question, which is going to be around, like, do it for yourself videos or like DIY videos, and like seeing authenticity as a concept, because a lot of it on YouTube, on content, on LinkedIn, etc., right? Well, there's this, in some ways, there's this 2 strand people are kind of going into, right? Which is people are ignoring AI, people are saying no to AI, and then there's the people who are then embracing AI, right? Now, to be honest, I bounce between the two, right? Because I can see both sides of that argument. But why do you think personally that like do it yourself videos is better and potentially the future in a world where, you know, the reality is AI is going to be around now. The genie's out of that bottle in that respect. But why is doing content yourself, filming content yourself, learning how to produce it yourself, that learning process to then output it, the future? When some would argue, actually, it's learning AI to then get it to learn how to speak for you, getting it to then clone your voice, so on, you know, in that respect.
Yeah, there's two approaches to it. So I think that very non-manufactured, non-engineered content, the sort of UGC vibe is an option, and it works really well for some people. But you know, the busy SaaS founder who's building a startup who needs to output 50 pieces of content a day, automation is the future for him or her. You know, so there isn't a right or wrong approach. I think you need to integrate how you use AI to speed up the parts of the process that don't need what you bring to the table, which for most creatives now is not the production, it's the ideas, it's the ideation of things. Very soon we're going to get to the point where AI can, like Sora, for example, craft visuals and make moving image, and then suddenly edit that into a vlog, or you're going to be able to input all of your raw footage, and it's going to be able to cut it up, add music, do text and vlogs, and you're going to be able to create a 15-minute video that's going to chop up chapters, right? The thing it won't do is the ideation stage. It will not be able to understand personality, subjectivity, all of the things that are emotional. It just won't be able to do. And I think that's really where the game is now. Sorry, it isn't in production, it's in the ideas stage. And this is an interesting one because when I started my agency 2018, there were at the time, don't quote me on this, I think it's around this number, there are around 4,000 production companies in the UK. Most of them were small, so sub 5 people. So that's sort of how the industry works. You had a big giants in the space, but most were small. When we quit, when I shut it down in 2024, there were 16,500. Now there's 18,000. So it's grown by 2,000 in the last year alone. And it's becoming this incredibly commoditized, very oversaturated industry where everyone sells the same thing. We make videos for your brand. We help your brand stand out online. We add story to your business. It's all waffle and it's all bullshit. If everybody can do the same thing for the same price, in the same speed and the same quality, what makes you different? And I think it's not about how you do things, it's why you do them. And it's the ideas behind the concepts. It's the way that you write stories. It's the way that you can connect with people one-to-one. And I was talking to someone yesterday. I know this is a bit of a tangent. I don't remember the last memorable ad that I watched on TV. I have absolutely no idea because it's such waffle. It's so mundane. It's so generic. Because I think people are scared to push the boat out because everyone just wants to create the ads and just wants to get the videos out. But no one's sitting there going, well, how can we do this better than anybody else that's ever done it before and be known as the brand that does it this way? You know, Liquid Death is a great example. They tried to come into the UK. The headlines were that they couldn't tap into the marketing, which I think is wrong because everyone in the UK loved their marketing. So I think it was more of a business side of things. But they're a brand that stick in your mind because of the way they do things. I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but so I think you need to introduce AI. I don't think it is just, that very authentic, non-manufactured content. I think you need to do both. But if I was to answer your question, sorry, it would be that I think it's because it feels more natural. And I think people click with it over that very automated, very polished, professional, kind of sales-esque sort of content. And I think people will buy from people. And I think we're entering this time now where, like Gary Vaynerchuk says, it's not about social media, it's interest media. And I think if you can create your community or your tribe or your small group of people, the followers don't really matter anymore. I think it's more about building connection with the right people. And the only real way that you can do that is through being yourself and showing up and telling stories and using UGC and, not fabricating things. I think that's why it does well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think it's an interesting time, but also like there's huge amounts of opportunity, right? I've always been in the camp of AI is not here to take your job, right? It's a tool to be used to allow you to do what you do best, right? And it's just going to allow you to basically be the reason why clients hire you, the reason why people work with you more, right? More of the time. And the actual tangible, we need this thing edited, we need this thing filmed, we need this creative, we need this image, we need so on, right? will, maybe not right necessarily in all of those cases right now, but they will have basically AI processes that then become the future, right? Look, that's the way AI is going, etc. Especially when you look at what Google's doing and so on and so on. There's going to be a sector, I think, to be honest, like. And there's kind of, we saw this after COVID where like people love in-person events, right? Because, and there's actually a rise in interest in in-person events. And I think if you are a digital curator, you are a digital business, you should personally, in my view, be looking to do the best of both worlds, right? You should be trying to be dominant online, trying to grab that attention through the TikTokification of these social media platforms, sure, and then also have a offering that is in person, that is slower paced, that is more, I would say, person-led, because that's what people will miss when everything else gets commoditized, right? And, you mentioned Gary, so I'll mention something he says consistently, which is brand is the only thing that matters after everything else gets commoditized, right? And we're seeing it with the shift from Google to ChatGPT, for example, right? You could ask ChatGPT to be in a position where you're like, I would like a pizza, or you could ask your Alexa or your voice device essentially order me a pizza. Or if brand is strong, you would go insert brand pizza, right, rather than just a pizza, right? And the same is true when it comes to everything else that we're buying, right? I mean, was that part of the reason why like the content you shifted into the content club, right? We talked about the lifestyle element of it, sure, but like was that where it was birthed, or was it like an idea that you had for a couple of years? Like, I'm really interested to hear sort of how you went from concept, like when was that concept, and then how, well, the timeline, and then how did you actually go about saying, and how did it feel, right? Because when, I think that some people listening to this will go, that must have been quite scary. I personally would be like, that's terrifying, right? Because you're completely, in some ways, you're completely reinventing yourself, because you're like, no, my identity is I'm an agency owner. I work with blah, blah, blah brand, right? And I'm really good at XYZ. And then suddenly you decide, actually, hold on, that's not what I want. And actually, hold on, no, this is who I am now. I mean, how would, like, wherever you want to take that, I mean, how did that happen? Like, where did you go? How did it feel?
I think so. I've always been very careful with how I present myself online. That's always been a decision that I've made. I don't want to be Jack, the video guy. I want to be Jack, the guy who makes cool shit on social, but also has this opinion on this and has this opinion on this. It's kind of a round business. But, I share everything from the trials and tribulations and the challenges that I've gone through with business, the successes of agency life, the shift. I've just been myself, and it kind of comes back to, just not manufacturing who I am, not having all my brand pillars and my personal brand strategy figured out. I just think if you're a nice person and you have a cool product, you're going to do quite well. You've just got to do it for longer than anybody else can commit to doing it for. That's literally it. I've been posting on LinkedIn now for probably 7-8 years, maybe. I was one of the first people to make video on the platform, which is kind of crazy. So I'll kiss my own backside on that one. But I've seen so many big creators come and go. Obviously I can't name drop because that's not very nice, but all the big creators back in 2020 through 2021, then they kind of died through COVID, and some others have now come back. And you will always see this ebb and flow of big influencers that then, moving on to different platforms because they're trying to ride the waves of what's trending and, the reach and those sorts of things. But the best ones, regardless of what happens algorithmically, will just be themselves. They'll show up regularly. They'll create good stuff to help other people, and they'll have a half decent product or service that actually does what it says on the tin. And I think my saying is brand equity. So it's kind of like Gary. When all else fails, if you're just remembered as someone who makes the best stuff, people will remember you, not from what you do or not from what you say, but how you make people feel. And if you can show up and you can just tell that story as open and honest as possible, which I know sounds a little bit wanky because we tap into personal branding and being authentic and all that stuff, you will be remembered. So regardless of the transitions that you make in your career, which always a plan from the get-go, people will kind of come along with you. They don't just follow you because Jack is the agency owner. They follow me because I like his journey, and maybe I don't need this yet, but maybe if he builds something in the future, I might give him a message. It's building that brand credibility, right? Throughout the career that I had running agencies, and by the way, I might run another one in the future, not now because I'm just exhausted from it, and I think I kind of burnt myself out with it, but maybe again in the future. Never say never. There's plenty more businesses to build, but I had the idea of this probably from 2 years in. So I used to do consulting on the side. I used to do strategy courses and those sorts of things. I did in-person workshops, sort of coming to the sort of maybe a year before I ended up closing the agency, just to kind of test the water and see where people were going. It was called the Odyssey Experience. We had like 10 people come to this in-person workshop and training. So I've always been testing other things in the background, and it's, I have multiple strings to my bow, so to speak. And I think every good business owner or every entrepreneur, whatever you want to call, I think they have these ideas in the back of their minds that someday they might get around to it, but this is kind of the thing for now. And I've always been very careful of not sort of, I kind of see it as you're sort of walking down this road and you've got lots of different lakes and ponds on your left and right. And you can go over to them, you can kind of prod them, and you'll have little ripple effects that happen. You can go over to the left and prod that one, and that will have another little ripple effect. But it really changes the pace of where you focus your attention. So I've always been very laser focused on the agency, but having this idea that one day I could maybe build this sort of space, I'm just not sure what that looks like, but I know that I want to help people, and I know what I want to be in person. I know there needs to be some sort of course element to it. How do we do that? So that's been it's been manifesting for 4 or 5 years, to be honest, mate. And it just so happened that when I lost interest in the agency and I just felt like I needed to change, it felt like the natural step. Everything was digital. There's an oversaturation of information. The industry was incredibly commoditized. Everyone's selling the same thing for the same price at the same speed. So how do you differentiate? I predicted that there would be a big need for DIY UGC, just because the overly professional stuff was becoming more expensive, and it meant that the smaller businesses couldn't actually afford to do that. And that meant that the gap was widening between wanting to do it but being scared to do it because it's too expensive and not knowing where to start. So I started diving into it, and I kind of just tested this idea. I said, guys, here's a new business. I've decided to do this. I made a very sharp right angle turn, and I said, I'm shutting the agency down. That's it. Within the space of a week, all the team had been notified that they'd been let go, which was rough. But that's part of running a business. Just so I could own that story. It wasn't, Jack's on the fence, he might do this, so maybe he's thinking of this, because that confuses people. I need to not show up with a problem, I need to show up with a solution. And the solution was, hey guys, I've shut the business down. This is the new business. If you want to follow it, let me know. And that was the story for about 9 months. Built a big wait list of people, launched it, sold out first time, sold out second time, sold out third time. And I've just kind of continued it down that path, really, mate. But it's always been in the back of my mind. I think you need that. I don't think you can put all your eggs into one basket. I think you need to have, yes, plan A will always work if you make it, but I do think you need to have other options just in case things don't work out as you'd like them. Because from my experience, where you start is never where you finish. And I think it's naive to think that life is a very straight line from here to end. It's not. You go back and 180 degrees and flip around and all the rest of it. So, yeah.
I think it's I'm really glad that we discussed that, because I think so many people may use that as permission to not see as what they're changing as an abandonment in respect to I'm abandoning the thing I grew for all right, however long it is. But I think it's one of those things where people can choose, and I've always been of the mindset, I think you follow the same as well, which is if there's too many days in a row, people have bad days, people are difficult, things are stressful, cash flow's struggling, agency life, blah blah blah, you don't have clients, you have clients but they're a pain in the arse, etc, so on, right? There's some days where you wake up and go, fucking hell, this can be really hard, right? And there is a percentage of those days where you just have to push through that, but after that, if that's a week, a month, and it's still there, and you haven't fixed the problems, and actually you fix the problems but you still feel this way, then I think what you just said, and hopefully people listening will be actually able to have the permission to be actually no, it's okay to step away, it's okay to not post for 3 weeks, not post for a month, to say, actually, hold on, I need to reevaluate what I'm doing in my life, not the agency or the model or the clients, etc., but what I'm doing for me. And I think that's really important. And I think, one of the things I started my career on was getting known for the video guy in your local area, right? And to an extent, I'm still leveraging that, and it's still working for me to an extent. And it does lean on to, I guess, in some ways, how you can create content. And I think we're both obviously very confident at creating content. So I always try to create some content or elements of content that resets that expectation, because I actually the other day forgot that people actually are psychologically struggling with the idea of creating content, because we've been doing it for a million years, right? So it's just yeah, of course we talk to a camera, yeah, we talk to people, this is the first time we've spoken in person, etc., right? So how do is it a psychological thing that people need to work on? When people start creating content, especially on their own with their phones, etc., is it one of those things where it's very easy to be overwhelmed? But if so, is that just a psychological barrier? Is that like, what would you say is the, I guess the 3-step, 5-step, whatever you want to call it, process of going from, okay, Jack, okay, Colin, I want to create some videos. I want to create some, conversation points about pain points or whatever I do. How do I even get started?
It's a great question. I'm glad you've asked that because it's not what you think. So now that I run the community, we've almost got 100 small businesses in it now, which is crazy in however long we've been doing it for. Categorically, it is not a technical problem. It is a mindset problem. The internet is rife and abundant with training tutorials. If I typed in now how to edit a video, 100,000 videos on YouTube will show up in all different shapes and sizes, from 4-hour masterclasses for free to some geezer on a YouTube reel showing you how to do things, right? YouTube short, YouTube reel, Christ. It's not an information problem and it's not a technical problem. It is a mindset problem. And people either are scared to give it a go. By the way, we're talking about a small portion of people here who know video is important, know they need to do it, but they just haven't figured out how. That is a very small percentage of people. Most people have heard of video, but haven't even dove into it yet. Depending on the platform you're going to, LinkedIn, for example, is about 5 years behind every other platform. So what's new on YouTube now, maybe in about 5 years' time, might come to LinkedIn, and people go, "Wow, this is really exciting." It's largely a mindset problem where a lot of people just don't know how to get started, and even before that, it's not they don't know how, it's that they are confused about how they show up. They don't want to mess up the business. They don't want to present themselves in the wrong way. They don't want to be judged online. They don't want to be criticized. They don't like the sound of their own voice, or their hair, or their smile looks too smiley, or whatever it is, right? It's all these different reasons. Then you step into a different level where you start to make content, and then you throw in the towel because after a month of posting every day, you haven't got the results. So there's a resilience and a kind of militant routine-esque mindset that you need, almost committing to it as a non-negotiable, being like, I'm going to now post a video every week for the next 10 years, which I know is going to scare a lot of people off. But if that scares you, I wouldn't do it, because what's going to happen is you're going to build yourself a really nice following of people in the first year. They're going to start to know you. And then if you start second guessing yourself and going, oh, it's not quite worked because I haven't gone viral, you've wasted an entire year of your life building something that you can't sustain. So I would really encourage people to just really consider whether they want to dive into it. It sounds scary, and I'm making it sound like that, but the world doesn't need more people giving you top 3 tips on how to build your personal brand. And it doesn't need another podcast. It doesn't need this. It needs people who are genuinely excited to show up and create the best content that they possibly can to help the people that are struggling the most at this moment in time in a totally unique way. That's what the world needs. There's too much content. There's too much information online. And I think that in and of itself is actually causing so much overwhelm and oversaturation and anxiety and borderline depression and frustration, because there's so much out there. There's so much information to consume. Topping that with all the influencers that tell you how to do this and their 10-step framework and buy this course for £3,997 to go viral in 10 seconds. It's almost like a plead to not make it unless you really feel in your gut that you are the type of person that could, with a bit of practice, become a really great creator, not just to market a product, but to build real brand, build real legacy here. Because again, kind of what I said at the start, it's not about being the best. It's just about doing it for the longest. And if you can commit to that, you will supersede and outlast all of the big influencers that you see right now, who will last the next 3 years, but then move on to somewhere else, or go move to Dubai, or whatever they want to do, or build another course. You will be known as the person who does that really well. If I was to encourage people to get started, I think I would just suggest, just start on your phone. Don't worry about kit. Just think of one idea right now, go and do it, and learn why it did or didn't work. It's the first thing to do. Don't think about a strategy. Don't build content pillars. Don't go and spend £5,000 on a course. Just make a video on your phone that you think people in your industry or your market want to know the answer to, and create it and show up and post it, and then look at why it didn't or didn't work. Literally it, just one step at a time. And once you've posted that, start to think about the next post. And then once you've kind of found your feet with it, Then start to think a little bit ahead. Start to build systems, start to bank your content, start to bulk film stuff, start to script things on the go, start to delegate and hire to editors. That's a different step, right? But for most people, it's that first video. And I think because there's so much information and so much overwhelm, just the thought of getting on a phone and just speaking to camera, it scares the hell out of people because they feel like they're going to do it wrong because they're not following all these different things. Just show up, film a nice video, be a nice person, talk about a product that you think is really good, and just stick to it.
And I think, I think so many people, and it's kind of to an extent what you were talking about, but so many people overthink the idea, right, of, oh, I could do this, oh, I could do that, oh, I could do this, oh, I could do that. So then they are kind of limited to nothing, right, because they have too many ideas and they don't execute, right, like, and so many people have said it, and so many people, the quote-unquote business influencers or whatever you want to call it, so I won't bother quoting anyone, but there's so much there to, if you want to learn the inner workings of how to do it, right? But the crux is going to be, if you have an idea, execute on it to then gain data to then learn from, right? That's the analogy to go, like, whatever the objective is, that's what you can then, that's the model, that's how you do it, right? You do this when you work with a client, if you're in marketing, and you do this when you do video production, you do this when you're running your own business, etc. The same when you would do cash analysis or like profit and loss, etc. Right? You do a bunch of things, you see what happens. Did that result in more profit or less profit? Okay, cool. Right? Did that result in actually more cost that then end up leading you to lose money? Okay, cool. So maybe don't do that bit, right? Etc. But that does, I guess, in some ways bring in the question mark, and we're talking about a lot of these buzzwords, right? Like authenticity and community and these things. But the reason why they're coming up a lot is because they are important, they are unique, they are, I guess, in some ways challenging to wrap someone's head around. And I think I kind of want to talk about community and lurkers next, right? The concept of lurkers. But for me, and this kind of leans into an extent about like starting, right? And I think it's one of those things where, so what happens if I put out my first video and it gets 5 views, right? So first you need to ask yourself like the psychology question there, but also then number two, but that doesn't then that doesn't thread the needle, or that doesn't help the needle in the regards to the bottom line to the business. I mean, is that what we're looking for? Because so many people, when they look at content, they're looking to build community, sure, but actually what they're looking at is vanity metrics. They're saying, oh, it's got 1,000 views, it's got this, it's got that. And what they're not doing is looking in the depth point of view of how their network, how their relationships, how their community is building, because that's the invisible stuff, right? I mean, have you always had the mindset of understanding that it's more about building community and relationships and in that respect, rather than just purely looking at those metrics, likes, comments, shares, etc.?
Yeah, 100%. I think people, it's really strange. It's strange. When people run a business, the ideas and notions that they have about how people make purchasing decisions completely goes out the window. And they kind of go, oh, I'll make this video, and then someone's going to buy from it. Okay, well, I'll ask you the question, Dave, of have you ever watched someone's video from a company that you've never heard of and bought their product or service? Oh, no, I haven't. So why would it work for you? People have this really strange idea of how it works, and that suddenly, because they run a business, the whole world bends around their product or service. So I think it's just that very underlying, very candid reality of the situation that no one gives a fuck. No one cares about your product or service. No one cares about your business. No one cares about you. They care about themselves, and they want their problem and their current situation, which is causing so much horror in their life. They want that fixed as fast as fucking possible. And I think for a lot of people, they kind of go, oh yeah, I didn't think of that before. But you're not sitting there thinking about 8 p.m. when you're watching Netflix, going, oh, I hope Carlton's good and his business is going well. I'm not thinking about you. I'm thinking about me. What am I doing tomorrow? What clients, what stress have I got in my life, right? It's not using you as the figure here. I'm just generally speaking, right? But I think
it's secretly actually all my fault. Everyone is really struggling in business right now. And that's what we found from this podcast, right?
It's all his fault. I think it is just the reality of the situation, and people massively underappreciate people. What's the saying? People overestimate what they can achieve in a year, but they underestimate what they can achieve in a decade. And I think so many people see the top 1% of creators on the internet who are smashing it or seemingly smashing it, but I will confidently say a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. It's a game of optics, social, right? If you look the part, you're going to be the part. That's kind of the game that we play, unfortunately. No one wants to work with a quiet business or someone who's had the worst month ever, because you go, oh, maybe it's not the best time to work with them then. They're struggling, then I'm going to struggle, It's like trying to find an SEO agency who isn't first page of Google. It's like, yeah, we're great. It's like, well, why aren't you first page then? Sorry, Carlton, I've completely forgotten the question. I tend to ramble. What was the question?
That's okay, don't worry. I mean, just to quickly add before we go back to the question, I think that's really important, and the same would I would say if you're starting out and you're looking to build a social media agency, a video marketing agency to join the million of us who also do it. You need to have your socials in. Like, at minimum, you need to have stuff going out on socials, right? There's a nuanced argument to say whether it's working, whether you should, etc., etc. You should be looking at that data. You should be constantly analysing it. You should be looking for those 1% wins. But at minimum, you have to post shit if you want clients to take you seriously about posting shit, right? And if you're not, then as a business, how can I sell content if I don't create content? You know what I mean? Like, and I think in respect to the question, I mean, like, people want authenticity, they want community, etc. And to an extent, you answered it, and it sort of leans into the next phrase of the question, which I was going to be like, growth and personal without the hustle, right? Because I think we're, especially during 2020, and even now, it's really weird because it's weird. I'm still working a lot, but this is not high volume in comparison to what was 3 years ago, right? Does that make sense? And I think for me, there is this kind of shift to I can work hard, but then I can also take a week off. Does that make sense? Like, it's not this constant, I need to keep pushing regardless, there's no end, there's no goal, I just need to keep going, I've done, and I guess the point there is about that kind of cherish act of, I did 100 hours of work this week. It's like, okay, you're just inefficient and not using AI, potentially, right? Or and there was this kind of, and I'll pose it as a question in a second, but there was this concept around work smart, not hard. And it's like, then the answer is like, well, actually, if you do a lot of hard, smart work, then you're going to outpace everyone else. But I think, again, it comes back to what we opened the podcast with, which was, what do you actually want? Are you looking to grow this agency that's going to turn over 100 billion or whatever it is? And but how do we balance that? Right? Is it just simply down to what we want for our lives, or is it actually you have ebb and flows? Some weeks you're really fired up about content, like this week, as we talked about before the podcast started. I'm launching some stuff. I'm launching a personal event. I'm talking about podcasts. I'm filming all the first opening episodes of the podcast. I've got some events. I'm seeing clients. It's really, really busy. So I'm really fired up, and that's when I create my best content. But also, like, okay, to London this weekend. Like, next week is a lot chiller in comparison, right? So there is balance, but I'm also setting my expectations of like, okay, cool. I'm going to achieve all these things this week, and then I'm going to recalibrate in the next couple of weeks to see what worked, what didn't, right? And how do people, I guess, focus on growth, focus on marketing without it always being that hustle mindset?
I have no idea is the answer, because I don't know. I don't know the answer. All I know is that I've done what worked for me at the time, but what works for me probably won't work for somebody else. You know, I built the first business on and at the detriment to all of my relationships, all of my family connections, my fiance and everything, right? Because I worked every fucking day, and I didn't stop, which sounds awful, and it was awful, but it also wasn't, because it was building something that I wanted to live. And as soon as I got to that point, that's when I had this epiphany of going, all of that for this, what was the point? And it just made me go, I don't want to do that again, to then reach this current goal that I have, get there and go, oh, I've moved the goalpost again. So it kind of comes down to how you are as a person and what you want out of life. I've always wanted personally financial stability, flexibility, and few but meaningful relationships with the right people, right? So I have very few friends. I pretty much just spend my day with my partner and my dog, and maybe 2 or 3 of my best mates. That's kind of it. I don't see family a huge amount, just because we're all in different locations over the UK and whatnot. There's not out of choice just because of limitations. But I mean, when I was building V21, which then turned into Odyssey, I was honestly probably doing 15, 16 hours every day and weekends. And that was probably for about 2 or 3 years straight. I didn't have a holiday for like 3 years. It was rough. But I think you're right. You know, it built a great business and we smashed it. But a lot of that work is done in the background. You know, I wasn't being supported whilst doing it. I was only supported once I got there. And people were like, wow, you've got a brilliant business. Teach me how to do that. And then you kind of go, well, it's taken me 3 years to get here. Are you ready to commit to that? And they go, yeah, we can do it in 6 weeks. It'll be fine. But I do think, you know, having that downtime in COVID, I think made a lot of people think. It was the period where most people actually got divorced in the UK because they were sat at home with their partners and going, I actually don't like this person, which is funny. Luckily, I'm going strong, which is good. 12 years nearly, which is crazy. But I think it gave people a lot of period to reflect on what do they want out of life. What's the next step? They've had this hugely hustle focused time. Now where do I want to go with the next thing? I do think to a degree, the economy has been tough since I've been in business. Actually, right now, I've never felt it tougher. COVID was tough, but this feels really tough at the moment. So I think it's still in the rearview mirror for a lot of people. In a bit of an economic downfall and all this sort of stuff, I won't dive into it. I'm not a massively political person, but you're still having people who really push hard, and you're seeing that happen because they are the prominent figures on social. They're really pushing the business. But I think you're also noticing quite a big difference in the people that are now taking a little bit more relaxed and maybe relying a little bit more on word of mouth and recommendation, but you're not seeing them as much, and that will absolutely have an effect on their business. We live in a period where if you are not present, you are not remembered. That's kind of how we work, annoyingly. Again, it's a game of optics. You think that you will be remembered, but people don't care. That's not, going back to that sort of analogy.
Yeah, again. But Jack, I've been in business 10 years and I've had this legacy. Yeah, unfortunately, the world doesn't give a shit. Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think there's a level of complacency, right, to an extent, but also it's okay. Like, I'm in two breaths with this. Like, don't be lazy if you want to grow. Also, be kind to yourself if you're like, actually, I've done my thing, and I'm actually on my wind down because I'm going to retire in 5 years. Like.
I was going to say, I think you have two modes. So you have your rest mode and you have your push mode. I think most people alternate between those modes. There is no such thing, in my opinion, as work-life balance. You cannot balance everything perfectly. I've learned that from experience. There is no way in hell you can manage growing a business to 10 staff, doing almost 100 grand a month, whilst also having great relationships with everybody, seeing your friends all the time, spending time with family, going on a hike on the weekends. It's just not possible. If it is possible, please tell me, because I haven't figured it out, right? And I've been doing it for a decade. You have work-life integration. So sometimes your work takes over and sometimes your life takes over, and you ebb and flow between those two states. Summer period, people go into a little bit of a rest state where they're just recovering, so they've had a busy year so far. They just need a bit of time to breathe things through, and things do happen at a slower pace. But then coming up to Christmas and the start of the new year, people really push, and people do work longer hours because they have more drive or because they've got more energy, right? It is just like charging a phone. You can't constantly balance your phone on 50% all the time. It's going to ebb and flow between those two states. So yeah, work-life integration, not work-life balance. Right now, I'm in rest mode. I'm still doing hours. I mean, I'm probably doing 10 hours a day, which is more than the average person, right? But it feels chiller because I'm used to 16-hour days. So it feels like this one. I got in at 7. I probably won't finish till 5, 6 tonight, maybe. But then I will probably go out for a hike after work, or I'll go to the pub, or it feels more chill in those downturn hours. So yeah, you have those two states.
And as we touched on the economy, right? Like, this is not necessarily a political point, but I've noticed when I stop not caring, because you need to be aware of it, right? You need to be aware of what's going on in the news at minimum, right? But when you actually take 100% accountability for where you are, bad or good, then you will then fix the problem, right? Because the reality is, if you're having a bad year economically, or you're finding it hard, or things are slow, the answer is it's down to you, right? Now, that sounds horrible, right? It does, right? But the reality is it's down to you. Also, if you're doing really well, also down to you, right? And the same is true. Like, if you're constantly looking at that development, you're constantly outputting, you're constantly like looking for those 1% gains so you can compound it, right? And the same is true in fitness. The same is true in anything, right? If you're focused on a task for a period of time and you're constantly focusing on getting better at the thing, if you're focused on the 1%, you will become 37 times better by the end of the year. That's the statistic. That's how the maths works. Cool, magic. But the crux is, we are in a culture, especially in the UK, in my view, for the longest couple of years, where we haven't looked at accountability, right? We haven't looked at, it's actually my fault wherever I am, good, bad, indifferent, so on, right? And I think that's what's going to change, right? Because I'm aware of it, right? But it feels weird to me because I'm in a good place, right? And I'm not going to be the one that's like, oh, I'm in a good place, so look at me, right? I am, but the only reason why I can see I'm in a good place when the economy is hot, there's always stuff going on, the economy is either good or bad, it's purely perspective, in my view, is because of the work I've done, and the work I'm continuing to do, right? And is it then a mindset thing? Is it then an action thing? I mean, this leads into my kind of like final thought question, which is like, what's next for you, and where do you see the Content Club going in, say, 5-10 years? But is it just pure related to action and then learning? Is that the solution to someone who's maybe listening to this and seeing either a clip of this or the whole show and saying, look, I'm not in a good place? What is the actionable steps? Is it go right back to ground zero, rebuild the marketing strategy, look at what worked previously, or is it actually keep going until you are that one hit away from hitting diamond or getting through the glass? What would you say?
I think so. So the last business I run, I had a pretty strict business plan with, and almost every 6 months we were changing it because I think when you're small, things change so quickly, and a lot of those things require change in moments that you have to be reactive on, not based on things that you could kind of foresee happening. COVID, or someone fell ill, or this person was off, or this person's just left, or whatever it is, right? So my goal really for this business was almost to not create a plan and kind of just go with the flow, which I can feel so many people listening to this going, oh, no, that's the awful way to run a business. It's an awful way to run a business. There is a right and a wrong, but I just think I'm kind of trying to use what I've learned here. And I'm just going with building the business based on the feedback from the community. Yes, I could have an idea of where I wanted to be in 5 years, which would be X amount of people doing this sort of revenue, having these sorts of guests on. And that still is always at the back of I call it the back shelf of my brain. It's sort of there, it's parked for the moment, and it might come to fruition, kind of like with the ideas of new business, right? It's the same sort of thing. But with this type of business, it's not something that I can say, hey guys, this is where it's going. It's very much a, hey guys, how have you found the experience so far? What do you feel is missing? How do you think as a community we can improve this type of business? Do we want more in-person stuff? Do we want more of these types of guests? I need to be much more of less of a builder, more of a facilitator. I need to take the feedback, both the good and bad and the ugly, and say, this is what I have created for you, who I basically serve, to better your experience. Because bettering their experience means that they're going to tell more people about it, which means that the growth of the community is going to get there, which means the finances are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, which means we can reinvest back into the club to grow the business, to do bigger events, to get better speakers on. It goes full circle, but it's less about me telling people where it needs to go and more about me kind of going with the flow. I'm kind of on this river. I've just jumped into an inflatable raft, and I'm kind of like, I kind of know the route that we're going to go. But suddenly a gust of wind might blow this way, and unanimously we go, this is a much better route to go down. Why didn't we think of this? So that is totally relevant to the business that I run now. If you're building a SaaS business, you need a fucking business plan. If you're building a pharmaceutical company, you're going to need a business plan. It's just that for my type of business, I think you need an idea of where you're going, but I think part of the fun of it is kind of just figuring it out as you go. Waking up and every month is different. And people feel part of that change. They feel part of the movement and the tweak of community, and they feel like they've been heard as opposed to kind of cast aside. The worst thing for me would be someone says, hey, Jack, I've just got this good idea for this thing you could do in the club. And I go, no. It's not happening. This is the plan, Richard. This is how it works. Because that person's going to go, well, I don't know if I want to be here then. You can't build it for everybody, but I think you can get the general consensus of where people want to go. So if that helps, I don't know. But
yeah, I think it's really important. Yeah. I think, and what I took from that was you want to head down river.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I know where I want to go.
Rather than like, and we'll deal with there's a fork in the river when we get to the fork in the river, rather than I think a lot of people can relate to that, because in COVID, right, like, did you plan COVID? Did you plan lockdowns in your business plan? Right. And I'm very similar in that respect with you, because I'm like, the business plan can be obsoleted by like you doubling your revenue, for example. Right, because or you, in the opposite way, want to scale back. Okay, well, that business plan is then completely irrelevant to what you want to do. But if you have a quote-unquote North Star, a reality which is, I'm going to go down river and I'm going to see what's down there, and as long as I continue to like what's coming down river, then I won't try and go and land, right? I'll continue to go down. And if we could get to a point where there's like kind of a left or a right turn here, right, then you need to make a decision, clearly, right? But you don't have to make that decision until you see that process, right? And until you see that either demand or etc. But I think it's also about COVID showed a lot of businesses, myself included, that you need to have a diversified plan. So you're not just reliant on one service, you're not just reliant on one thing, but also in the next breath, you also need to be able to focus for a period of time on marketing and talking about a plan. So if you have a plan to do 1 video a week, you have a plan to do 2 videos a week, whatever it may be, right? Then you need to commit to that plan for a year. You need to commit to that plan for 6 months. You need to complete that plan. So because otherwise, you don't do it long enough for it potentially to work, right? And it's not to say that the thing you're currently doing is the thing you're going to do forever, but you just need to commit a time frame to doing it, right? I'm going to do the podcast in a hybrid way. Cool. Is that going to in turn more views, more interest, more important episodes, better guests, blah, blah, blah? Perhaps. At this stage, no idea, right? But I know I'm a good interviewer. I know I enjoy doing podcasts. And actually, I'm passionate about production. So I can see a world where it does. The actual tangible reality is going to be when I do it and then see the data. But I'm looking at it from a 6-month window or a year window rather than okay, right, so we did an episode today and it didn't do well.
I agree. I think you need to give things time to breathe, especially in the content space. That is the nature of the beast. YouTube works the same. You could post a video that gets 10 views today, but could over the next 5 years get 100,000 views because it increases the search terms and blah, 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 right? So it's a search game. But no, I do agree. I think that my parting advice for it would be have a direction of where you want to go. And there's a book, I can't remember what it's called. I can't remember who it's by, sorry, but it's called Fuck Yes or No, or something like that. Fuck Yes or whatever it is. Basically, the whole point of this book is if it is not aligned with what you want to do and it's not aligned with your mission and it's not the absolute yes, I need to do that. If it's not that real visceral, raw emotive feeling, don't do it. If you're kind of like, yeah, I could do video, but maybe I could do this. Don't do it. Do the thing that you're most passionate about, because I think time is finite, right? You only have so much time. And I think the time that you waste half-assing things or going, yeah, I've put a bit of time into it, but I've also, my priorities are not there at the moment. Don't do it then. Do it when you can put 100% effort into it and you can give that period of time the most, just the most dedicated period of your time and energy and love and passion into making this thing great. With video, for example, commit to it for a year. Put your all into making the best content. Don't just go, oh, I've got to make a video today, I've got to do it tomorrow. Really commit to it. Set a deadline, like you said, and analyze what has and what hasn't worked. If it hasn't worked, kill it. If it has, keep doing it or revive it somehow, or finesse it and those sorts of things. But you've got to put effort into stuff, because I think we live in a world where so much takes our attention. There's so many shiny object syndrome. There's so many different things that you can do at any given time. You could start this and you could do this little side hustle and you can do consulting on the side and you could maybe do this as well, or for this service. It just comes back to being a good person and doing one thing better than everybody else for longer than anybody wants to commit to it for. It's literally what it comes down to. But most people don't want to do that, But again, I just want to say to anybody listening, I'm saying all of what I say now from the perspective of someone who has not hit 30 yet. I'm 28 years old. I've built, I guess you could technically say, 3 different businesses now that have all been very different. The way that I have done things will not work for you. You have to kind of figure that out on your own. But the raw principles are, if you're going to commit to something, commit to it and do it properly. And just stop thinking about the short term. Think about, where do you want to be in 10 years? What do you want to be? How do you want people to speak about you when they're down the pub having a pint with the mate when you're not in that room, right? That's really where legacy and brand equity comes in and reputation comes in. And I think from what I've learned in business, all of the things that have happened over the last 10 years, some of them are just starting to come to fruition now. The connections that I made in the first week of business, they're starting to join my community and they're starting to give me contacts and the right people, and that's starting to build the new business. Things do just take time to kind of flourish. So yeah, just stick with it. It's kind of what I'd say.
Yeah, no, 100%. And just to kind of a final note before we wrap up, I think people who the main thing I found in a similar time of being in business is you will only get resilience and you'll only be resilient by just continuing to push through, regardless of what happens in the news cycle, regardless of whether we're dealing with lockdowns, regardless of whether we're dealing with COVID, regardless of whether we're dealing with Rachel Reeves's spring budget that's today, for example, at the time of recording, etc., 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 etc. And for me, maybe it's me being brutal, maybe it's me being horrible, potentially, right? But it's all an excuse if that's the reason why you're not doing X or Y, right? It's I can't do it because of news thing. I can't do it because of X. I can't do it because of Y. Be honest with yourself. A, it's not a priority. B, it is a priority. Pick one, commit. That's it. That's simple. You want to do video, do it, right? And then commit to it. Don't do, oh, I did it, and then it didn't. My first video got 5 views, right? Because you need to learn and how to do it. You need to have those 1% improvements to be able to actually have the fruits of the labor, whether that's revenue for a company, whether that's going viral, whether that's developing a club, a community, whatever it is. That's the reason why it will work. But for those people who want to connect with you, for those people who want to, firstly, see your content, secondly, see what the club's about, and or potentially join, Jack, where can people connect?
You can hit me up on LinkedIn. Just type in Jack Gaisford, Gaisford. I do a lot of YouTube stuff every week. I do LinkedIn every week. They're kind of my two main platforms. Drop me a message there. Happy to help where I can. And if you want to check out the club, link will be on my LinkedIn, or just type in www.the-content-club.co.uk. Have a look. And yeah, happy to help where I can.
Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this episode and would like to see the next episode that might be in person, might be on location, or might be remote, then make sure to be subscribed, leave a like, let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you very, very soon.